Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to begin by thanking my colleague Kenny Gibson for bringing this debate to Parliament. We a few weeks back debated driverless cars in the members' debate sponsored by Ivan McKee, and there was a particularly interesting contribution that Mr Gibson made in that, referring to the trolley dilemma in regards to how would a driverless car decide how to interact in such a situation. And that speaks to some of the problems and challenges it will have with AI moving forward, and it speaks to the profundity of attempting to understand the impacts it will have. But I think in terms of looking forward, it might be useful to perhaps to begin by looking back and situate what potentially could happen within the broader context of previous industrial revolutions. Mr Lyndhurst referred to the potential for alarmism and also potentially the overstating what could actually happen. So if we think about maybe the first industrial revolution with regards to the impact of steam and the railway, that is perhaps one of the most profound changes that have happened since the agricultural revolution. Then if we think about synthetic chemicals, plastics, synthetic dyes, for example, again profound. But one of the most profound inventions was the washing machine. It emancipated many, by a large majority, women from domestic drudgery. And men too. The microwave oven, the kitchen, plumbed water, sanitation. So these are the most profound impacts. So if we're going to suggest that the fourth industrial revolution, as a consequence of AI and automation, will be equally as profound as that, then we have to really consider what we mean. Now, in terms of whether AI will have an impact upon that level, I think it possibly could. And the reason I do so is if we do reach a stage where machines can start to learn for themselves. And then there is that situation for exponential growth. There are some who forecast that machines will pass the Turing test within our lifetime. And when that happens, that creates a range of considerations which do seem like science fiction but could become very real. If a machine develops a capacity to think, potentially to feel, should that machine have rights? Should it have responsibilities? Should it have duties and obligations? These are some of the questions that we may face going forward, and the fact that they're even possible suggests how profound this impact could be. Now, I think, rather than these sort of speculative concerns, much attention has, of course.
Gordon Lyndhurst. Thank you.
Would the right to vote be one of the rights that you would have to consider in that scenario that you were postulating? The member.
Tom Arthur.
It perhaps sound a bit so speculative to be almost farcical. But if we think of perhaps the roles that machines will have in, for example, law as potentially paralegals, the introduction of machines to generate automated responses for the civil service, as some jurisdictions are experimenting with, and indeed potentially could have a role in supporting politicians in doing their job representing their constituents. For example, a machine could potentially go and take on a piece of constituency casework. Then there is significant implications for our democratic system and how we think about that, even before we get to a stage of genuine artificial intelligence. But the one point I wanted to pick up on, and it is, of course, speculative concerns aside, the most profound point, which is the supposed or potential threat to jobs. And I think a point that's been highlighted is a question of job displacement or job replacement. And I want to welcome the Scottish Government's latest publication on this, the technological change in the Scottish labour market, which I'm sure the Minister will refer to. And it takes a very balanced view. And certainly my experience on the Economy, Jobs and Fair Work Committee, when we have taken evidence, is that while there are people on the fringes who make predictions of either catastrophe or no difference at all, the general consensus seems to be actually, as what has happened in previous industrial revolutions, is new jobs will emerge. So just as we saw the decline of horses as a means of transportation and power, other jobs took place. So I think that's potentially where we are going forward. But I think it's very important that we're cognizant about the opportunities and the risks going forward. And while it's speculative and inchoate, we have a duty as politicians to start putting these ideas into the public domain and making sure the population at large is aware of them, because there is an inevitability about it, And when it does happen and these changes do take effect, it's vital that we are prepared and, most importantly, that the public are prepared as well. Thank you.